Back in early 1990s, internet was not an option. All I had was the cassette insert, is that how you call it? A folded tiny paper slit within the cassette tape with lyrics in English and sometimes, if I am lucky, in Korean.
Oh, yeah, the inserts. Oh, yeah. You're really taking us back. Yes. Yeah, that used to be in those plastic covers of the tape cassettes.
Yes.
Okay.
The joy of unfolding the insert. And I also had a huge, thick English-Korean dictionary. And then I phonetically dictated the lyrics in Korean. So I could mimic the sounds without knowing what it means. And then one day I realized, interesting, I somehow understand what they say. I was very happy.
Welcome to Our Burning Questions, a professional learning podcast where we answer your most compelling questions about teaching, serving, and supporting multilingual learners. I'm your host, Jasmine Coaxum, and through our talks, I look forward to bringing the methods, philosophies, and stories behind teaching multilingual learners to light. Let's get into the show. Okay, so today on Our Burning Questions, we have the pleasure of speaking with Jung Han. So, Jung Han, please just first tell us a little bit about your current position in education at this point.
Sure. First of all, this is my great pleasure to have this opportunity to join this podcast. This is actually my very first podcast.
No.
Yes. So I'm very excited. I am a proud TESOL educator with by now almost 20 years of international teaching experience, first in my native country of Korea, then Japan, and then now in the US. I am currently a postdoc housed both in the Center for Learning in the Digital Age, we call it the LIDA Center, and also Warner School of Education at University of Rochester. At the LIDA Center, I mainly work on generative AI related projects and initiatives that explore its implications for education, both K-12 and higher ed. I also have teaching responsibilities at Warner. I teach graduate TESOL courses on applied linguistics. I also teach courses out of TESOL context, such as doctoral research course and qualitative data analysis course. So I'm doing a lot of exciting things as a postdoc. And I'm also a co-chair of NICE TESOL Applied Linguistics SIG. I have been part of this wonderful team since 2019, I believe. And one of our major responsibilities is to organize the annual Applied Linguistics Winter Conference, ALWC. We are about to announce the call for the conference proposal and conference planning team recruitment. So please stay tuned.
Okay, and this normally takes place in March, right?
March or April, because we don't want it to overlap with other major TESOL AL events or school vacations. So we are trying to finalize the date right now.
Oh, I see. Okay. And will it be in Rochester this year or?
Annual conference will come to Rochester, but ALWC moved to fully online. So it will be on Zoom. Yes.
Okay. I was just curious because that is a conference that I participated in back in 2020 in Rochester.
Yes.
Before everything blew up.
Yes. That was the very last face-to-face event when the COVID hit. So when the conference finished around 4:30 p.m., the planning team was wrapping up, cleaning up the entire building. And then we got an email, the school university-wide email saying from this moment, no face-to-face event on campus. So we were lucky.
Okay, so I am going to dive into something that you already mentioned about the Center for Learning in the Digital Age. So you are actually a founding member of that center, correct? Can you take us through the process of how the center was developed as a founding member?
So founding member, wow, it sounds a lot bigger and more important than it is.
Really?
At that time, the dean of Warner School, Dr. Rafaela Borassi, she felt the necessity to launch the core center that really focuses on the learning in the digital age. So she initiated the idea and she actually founded this center. And that was when I just started my doctoral degree. So I joined the team that really started building the formation, the basis foundings of the center. And I have been quite comfortable with the technology, so I became a part of the team. And ever since, I have been involved in really exciting opportunities because there were like major shifting points. Like when COVID hit, the schools had to convert immediately online. But because of the LIDA Center and its focused dedication to really enrich the online learning opportunities for years. In my case, I said, okay, students, tomorrow we will meet online. Everybody ready for that? And everybody was like, oh yeah, we're very familiar with the Zoom. So it was very smooth transition for us. And then now it's Gen AI, all this ChatGPT and discussions around it. And luckily, the LIDA Center is really leading the role to collecting and disseminating, making knowledge, information approachable, accessible to the community. So, yeah, very dynamic and eventful time with the LIDA Center.
Okay, great. So we will talk a little bit more about that further into the episode. But first, I would like to take our audience back a little bit to understand how you even got involved in English, the interest in English, etc. And so in order to do that, I am going to actually read something that I found on your really beautifully designed e-folio. So just brace yourself. I think this is the cutest thing ever. So I first encountered English in my home of Seoul, Korea at the age of 10. It all started when my older sister brought home 2 cassette tapes. One was Michael Jackson and the other was the boy band New Kids on the Block. I loved those tapes, and although I was eager to understand the lyrics, there were very limited resources and opportunities to study English in South Korea at that time. I decided to explore English on my own and began to listen to the tapes repeatedly, almost wearing them out in the process. Now, this is how you explain your very first interest in English. And I would really like you to take us from that initial moment or that initial interest in music and learning lyrics to how you actually became an educator or were inspired to become an educator in this space.
Sure. And I'm glad you were laughing reading my introduction, because when I talk to my students about my experience, they don't really know who New Kids on the Block is. I would call it a generation gap.
It sure is, yes.
Yes. So,
yes. So you and I are part of a similar generation. Let's just say that, because I know exactly who those people are. Okay.
Back in early 1990s, internet was not an option. All I had was the cassette insert. Is that how you call it? A folded tiny paper slit within the cassette tape with lyrics in English and sometimes, if I am lucky, in Korean.
Oh, yeah, the
And
inserts. Oh,
yeah.
you're really taking us back.
Yes.
Yeah, that used to be in those plastic covers of the tape
Oh,
cassettes.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
The joy of unfolding the insert. And I also had a huge, thick English Korean dictionary. And then I phonetically dictated the lyrics in Korean so I could mimic the sounds without knowing what it means. And then one day I realized, interesting, I somehow understand what they say. I was very happy. But the interesting thing was that I was not doing well at all in English classes at school. For example, I was scolded by my teacher for not knowing the English alphabet during my first English class. Or in English tests, I always got a really poor grade. Let's say there was a question, where is Jane? I was supposed to write, I don't know, a common short essay question for the first year English class. Instead, I wrote, I have no idea, because that's what my fantastic English teachers like New Kids on the Blog or Michael Jackson said. And then my teacher said, wrong answer. That's not what you learned from the textbook. I was so sad thinking English from those cassette tapes and English from the textbooks were two completely different things. I never thought I was good at English until I entered the university, because at the university, all English classes were a very conversation-based, not text-based anymore, textbook-based anymore. And I realized, hey, my English is actually pretty good. What is wrong with the school test scores? So that experience really guided me to become a language educator who puts strong emphasis on asset-based pedagogy, I would say, which is fundamentally grounded in appreciating, acknowledging, and enriching students' interest-driven or interest-based language expertise, like my English skills from listening to the music, by helping students connect their expertise to their personal, academic, and professional wants and needs. That actually closely linked to my specific attention to what students do out of the classroom during their interest-driven practices. So I began teaching in 2004, and I have always invited students to consider how their expertise they gained from in and out of the classroom provide valuable and meaningful starting point for new learning.
Okay, so I always think it's very interesting to hear people's origin stories, right? Like what really inspired them to go into this field, and then more specifically to really focus on the types of pedagogy that they decide to focus on, right? And so I love how you really linked that initial experience to now what you've really developed in terms of your area of expertise in the field. And so you did mention that this is, again, something I took from your lovely eFolio, where you mentioned that it's clear that you have a reputation for being tech savvy, right? But you mentioned that it doesn't come from using the tech tools during your face-to-face experiences with students, but it comes from your ability to identify and analyze their interests and their needs in order to design effective out-of-class learning experiences, right? And then you go on to say that you use tech tools to facilitate these kinds of experiences for students, and you basically thoughtfully integrate tech with the course objectives. So with that in mind, what kind of drew you to this integration of tech and education, right? Because, of course, there are many ways to explore the assets that students bring to class, right? What made you decide to integrate tech and education?
So The ultimate goal of my teaching would be creating a learning ecology that connects students in and out of classroom practices and life. So not from reflecting my experiences, not seeing my interest-driven English learning and text-based English learning in school as two isolated things. I wanted students to see and experience them as an integral ecology of their lives. So let's say I came to integrate technology with education while I was looking for ways to identify student interests in order to create those experiences. In many cases, a huge portion of students' interest-driven practices include technology components, like playing games, listening to music, watching Netflix and YouTube, or engaging in online communities, and so on. So focusing on augmenting and reaching them resulted in natural integration of technology and education for my teaching. So, for example, sometimes I simply add values and new insights to students' already existing technology use out of the classroom. One example would be my one student from Korea when I was teaching sixth grade students. One student came for me for help. He said his English medium online game account got hacked, and he is in the middle of writing an email of complaint to the company using English, and he asked for my help because he wanted his email to have this a firm tone to evoke the company's actions without sounding overly aggressive. So I see, you know what, that's actually a great learning opportunity. Like in English, there is this thing called register. So that became a learning opportunity. So I gave him an opportunity to see the value. What you're trying to do is also a great English language learning opportunities. Just like your other interest-driven online game, English medium game playing activities. So I add values to their already existing tech use, or sometimes I use new technologies to my students to meet their wants and needs. I can give you an example. Back in 2014 or 15, I was teaching a community language program course at Teachers College, Columbia University. The class was full of adult international students who really wanted rich English speaking opportunities, even out of the classroom. Because, the class time was not enough. I asked, do you all have access to a phone? Mobile, landline, doesn't matter. And everyone said yes. Then I created a Google Voice account. It will link your phone number to a newly created Google Voice number. So students can call the number. I cannot pick up the phone, but they can leave a voicemail. And then I think Google Voice changed the way they share the recordings. But at that time, I got from Google Voice, which forwarded me the email with their recording and auto transcripts. So I listened to it. I forwarded that email back to my students with my feedback. Each week, I gave my students prompt so that they can give me a call, do the speaking for 3 minutes, and they could repeat it as much as they wanted. And each time they got my feedback. So I think in that very purpose-driven technology integration is maybe the second way I use technology in my teaching. And related to that point, but out of the TESOL context, this semester I used ChatGPT I purposefully integrated ChatGPT to my doctoral research course this semester. Whether I am happy with the technology or not, my first-year doctoral students would be the first generation who started and ended their doctoral journey with generative AI and ChatGPT. And then it's just like alcohol. Experts says it actually is better that parents talk to their children about the responsible consumption of alcohol at early age, right? Because it can influence their attitudes, behavior, and mindset for alcohol. I think the same thing can be applied to ChatGPT. I wanted students to have this mindset, perspectives of using ChatGPT not as a tool that will do the job for them, but really augment their learning. So we had 2 rules to use ChatGPT in our course. 1, we only use the prompt that we generated, we decided to use through class discussions. And 2nd, whenever we use ChatGPT, we should be transparent about it. So like we used one prompt that goes like this. Like, I want you to the ChatGPT, I want you to ask me questions to help me draft a research proposal on student's topic. Ask me questions until you have enough information to create a draft. Always ask me or suggest me one question at a time. Ask me the first question. So let's say this is a 20-minute activities and now it's a flipped interaction. ChatGPT will ask questions. What kind of population do you have in mind? Then students answer. Then ChatGPT will say, okay, now let's talk about research setting. What do you have in mind? So for 20 minutes, ChatGPT will keep helping my student to generate like tacit ideas into a written format, right? Using that prompt allows students to have thinking partner who can provide tailored feedback out of the classroom. The thinking partner who will never get tired. So I think that's the way I always integrate technology into the education setting. And just so you know, if you're interested in the prompt that I just mentioned or any other prompt engineering, Dr. Jules White from Vanderbilt University has a fantastic online course in Coursera. You can enroll for free. Try that course. You will learn so much about prompt engineering. I highly recommend.
This is fantastic because I was just going to talk about the fact that I grabbed on to ChatGPT like when it came out because I'm really interested in tech and integrating tech, and I just find it to be an interesting way to learn, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's fun and interesting. And so, I used it in order to help my students come up with some ideas for maybe a podcast episode, right? So we had a very transparent session where I said, okay, let's open it up. Let's look at it. Let's talk about maybe if you have an idea, like, okay, give me some ideas for an episode or give me a script for an episode on Spanish cuisine. Mm-hmm. But I never even had the idea that you could just ask ChatGPT to ask you questions mm-hmm. in order to develop something. So this is fantastic.
Yes, you can try this prompt with your Spanish cuisine prompt. Like, I'm trying to make a Spanish cuisine. Help me develop a recipe that asks me first question, ask one question each time. Then it will say, what kind of ingredients do you have at this point with you? So it will really try to ask you questions, gather information to really create recipe that's really tailored to what you have.
Okay, great. And can you repeat the name of the professor, is it, that has this wonderful course?
The Professor Jules White, Jules White from Vanderbilt University, prompt engineering for ChatGPT. I think that's the name of the course. Yeah, it's very, any educators will benefit from it, not only for their teaching, but really having using ChatGPT as your thinking partner, really augment your existing ideas. Think about how people respond to ChatGPT. If you're new to it, people usually, you get lots of wows, right? Because even if you ask it to generate something out of blue from the scratch, it will generate something because that's what it's supposed to do. But in many cases, that prompts, that outcome can be really random or too general, too broad. You may even spend more time on personalizing it, customizing it for your wants and needs, right? The real strength of ChatGPT or other Gen AI is really augment what you already have, really polish it. So I'm trying to build the mindset and perspectives on approaching ChatGPT or any other Gen AI tools, right? Don't make it write something for you. You give it your writing and make it do the final polishing job.
Now, you mentioned Professor Jules White, but do you personally have some type of courses or something that you have available where you're kind of taking educators through these abilities?
Mm-hmm. So I'm working on multiple websites and self-paced e-modules for educators. Only one of them is out there. I can share the links after the podcast. If I share it with you, then would you be able to post it?
Oh, of course, they would be in the show notes.
All right.
Yeah, of course. Yes,
so I have
for sure.
I have one website that's called Generative AI for Educators. It's targeting educators in general, but it has a page for prompt engineering. It also introduces the prompt that I just shared and also has links to the Coursera course that I just mentioned. So if you go to that website, you will have like real gist, introductory information for prompt engineering.
Great. And so, there's three things that you said that I want to reiterate or highlight, right? First of all, I love this term that you threw out there, learning ecology, right? And I think a lot of times in the past that educators didn't really realize the importance of this, right? I think even more so in certain cultural contexts, like when you mentioned what happened in South Korea. Now, for me, as an educator from the United States, if a student had written, "I have no idea," I would have been like, wow, this is so native sounding. I would have been like excited to see that answer, but your teacher was like, it was the opposite reaction. And so just this whole idea of integrating experiential English as well. Okay, like not just the textbook variety, but the conversational stuff, the stuff that's in music, the stuff that kind of the spice of the language, right? So I really love that was a focus of yours in integrating technology, was to create this learning ecology, which is definitely so necessary. I also love that you called ChatGPT a thinking partner that never gets tired. Right? So you could just keep going on, and it's like it's there for you. Yes, you wanted to say something.
I'm not really looking at ChatGPT for English language learning at this point, but I'm waiting for it to be, because now it's text-based. And my English language courses are mainly speaking-based, speaking-centered. So I'm waiting for ChatGPT or any other generative AI chatbots become voice-based or video-based, which are coming soon. So they will, in their smartphone, they will have like voice-based ChatGPT or any other Gen AI chatbots. Think about the frequency, language input and output, or potentially cultural references that our students can get 24/7. Yeah.
Okay, so the third thing that I did want to mention from what you said was that I think you were quite ahead of your time with what you were doing with Google Voice, being that that was back in, you said 2014. So
I
you said
think so, yes.
2014, and people were still very hesitant to integrate, even in 2014. I mean, still hesitant to integrate technology
Mm-hmm.
into the classroom environment. And so I'll use that kind of to segue a little bit into what you think maybe some of the biggest fears that educators still might have about integrating technology in such a meaningful way. And do you have some type of advice for them to overcome this fear? And definitely now it's not just about integrating technology, but it's like now it's ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
is another this kind of like behemoth that educators are like, oh my God, now I have to deal
Mm-hmm.
with this, or maybe I'm choosing to turn a blind eye to this, or so how can, what do you think are the reasons are behind some of these fears, and also how can they be dealt with appropriately?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think the fear, especially with this emerging technology that didn't exist before, like generative AI or ChatGPT, the fear of this mysterious world realm, its capability, its capacity, with us not really knowing how it works or how to use it in an effective way, lack of training and support, equity issues, data privacy, cost, because at first it was for free, but now it's like everything is subscription based. You have to pay. It's like a drug dealers. They send out things for free, and once you cannot live without it, they say, but now you have to pay,
Wait
right?
a minute, wait a
So,
minute. You, Jung Han, you're
yeah.
very interesting because first you talked about alcohol and
Yeah,
now
right.
you're equating something to drugs. Ah, okay, interesting.
I haven't thought about that.
Very
Because,
relatable. Okay, very relatable.
yes, that's a great point. There are so many issues, right? So having a fear is, I think it's a very natural thing. And whether you are new to this technology or you knew what's about to come, you know it so well, I think the fear, like overwhelming feelings that we feel, I think it's all across the community of educators. And even if, let's say, you really learned how to use ChatGPT and you try to integrate this tool to your teaching, but this kind of technology changes all the time, upgrade its interface, algorithm, something visible, something not really visible that we cannot really know, policy changes, guideline changes, like how do we keep up with all that, right? My advice would be, and try not to focus too much on tools. It may sound cliche, but we really need to put our purpose first, always. I'm going back to the issue of mindset and attitudes to encounter new technology, not just generative AI, but technology that hasn't emerged yet, right? The whole community cannot flip whenever there is groundbreaking technology, right? We cannot be tool specific. And let me simplify and introduce this really famous experiment from cognitive science field. So let's say you have two groups of students. For group A, you put multiple objects on the desk and you have them choose 5 objects and then say, choose 5 and make something cool out of them. Then they will try to build buses, buildings, castles. Then they will do that. Group B, you don't show the objects. You ask them question first. If you can make one cool thing, what would that be? Then they will say, world peace, or like a robot, space shuttle, like really massive, huge things. And then you reveal your objects, and then now choose 5 and create what you just mentioned. right? And then the study shows the level of creativity and resourcefulness are very different. That really gives us an idea. We have to put purpose first and then see if any Gen AI tools can augment your purpose, your goals. So you don't have to keep up with all this. I mean, it's good if you can spend time and energy to locate and update your knowledge on Gen AI tools. But we are educators. We have tons of things to do on our plates. So if you try to put your purpose first, you know what, this is what I really want to do. I think this will be really helpful for our language learners. But there is this thing that I really want to augment or I want to polish. Can Gen AI help me achieve that goal, right? And then that very purpose-specific search for among the Gen AI tool, I think that can be one way that you can maybe alleviate fear and approach Gen AI in more time and energy efficient ways.
Yes.
And yes, and one more advice is try not to be too fixated with what the technology tool was originally designed for, right? So people are, if you look at the collective knowledge of people are very creative. Think about the bread, how do you call it? Bread clip, the plastic clip that you use to close your plastic bag.
Oh, that little, it's
Yeah,
the stringy kind of thing. Thing, like a twisty.
It can be twisted thing or it can be like a little flat plastic.
That's right. Where did that come from?
Yeah. And people use it to specify the glass. This is my glass, that's your glass. Or they use it as a key holder, or they put it in the power plug saying this is for hair dryer, this is for TV, right? People can use things in a versatile ways. I think we can do the same when we approach the tech tools. Yeah, so be creative and try to see tools. So if you start from purpose, I think you will figure out ways to use tools in a completely different ways.
And so now earlier you talked about your work with the Center for Learning in the Digital Age. Maybe you could give our audience an example of one of the really digitally rich projects that you've had the opportunity to work on with that center.
So my responsibilities at the LIDA Center are not TESOL specific. It's more education in general.
Okay.
So I'm doing lots of things. I'm leading PD workshops on Gen AI, piloting websites and modules, just like I said before. I'm leading Gen AI study group. And one of the recent projects that I'm working on is supporting the NSF Future of Work grant project. It's a 4-year project with an interdisciplinary team of educators, musicians, and engineers and technicians to develop new ways to empower musicians to leverage AI-powered tools.
Oh, okay.
For their music production and dissemination. It's a very new field for me, and I'm having a lot of fun working with this team.
Okay. All right. Nice. So now I actually saw you in person very briefly at the NICE TESOL conference this past November. The room was packed, so I wasn't really able to comfortably stay, unfortunately. And I'm really curious as to what that presentation was about. Was it along the same lines of Gen AI? Just tell us a little bit about that recent presentation.
Sure. Using the picture guessing game called Dixit with student-generated content. So if you are new to Dixit, Dixit is a thought-provoking picture card games with beautiful illustrations.
Dixit,
Dixit.
Oh, just like it sounds. Okay. All right,
Yes.
Dixit.
Yeah. Let's say each player has 4 cards. I'm the storyteller. I choose one card, and it only has beautiful, dreamy illustrations. And then I try to create clue, one sentence, one word. And then after listening to my clue, each players will choose one card that matched the best with my clue. Cards facing down, we put it on the table, and then everyone needs to figure out what the storyteller's original card is.
Now, wait, are these digital cards or physical cards?
They're physical cards.
Okay.
Yes, they're physical cards. It's an award-winning game. So the beauty of this game is your clue cannot be too difficult, too abstract, or too specific. Because if everyone guesses your card, storyteller loses. If nobody can guess the storyteller's card, storyteller still loses. So you really have to figure out the fine line between too abstract and too specific. But you can use it for multiple ways in language classroom. I sometimes have my students choose random cards, and as a team, they have to create feasible stories by using all the elements of illustrations within their chosen cards. So there are many different ways. So back in 2016, I presented the workshop on introducing ways to use these Dixit cards in English language classroom. But, I always try to augment this activity, and then I wanted to have illustration cards that my students generated. But hand drawing, it doesn't really work because it takes just so much time, energy, and skills to have all these detailed elements to express abstract ideas for storytelling. But now Gen AI, your sketch, your written prompt, your description, in seconds, students can generate their own illustrations.
So that's where the tech comes in. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That's an example of augmenting what you already do. Yes, not start from the tool, but start from my purpose, my pedagogy. So I was sharing the Dixit by using Gen AI, using student-generated content. And it's not just illustration. Now students can do the same with the music that they created with Gen AI, or video clips that they generated with Gen AI. My presentation was sharing all those tools.
Okay. All right. So before we go today, I have 2 more questions for you. So we have talked about a website where people might be able to, where they will be able to find information on generative AI and what we can do with it as educators. But what other resources can you share with us in terms of how we can find what you're working on specifically?
So my goal was to complete that website. So it will be an archive. So it will have a brief introductory information curation, but it also will work as an archive of multiple resources that you can take a look at. My goal is to finish that by the end of this year.
Well, we have a couple of weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah. Share it
All right,
with
you're
you.
going to be busy. All right, yeah.
Yes. So that with this podcast, I can share the resources with you.
Fantastic. Okay. And then lastly, the question that I ask everyone who is brave enough to come on this show is, what burning question should today's educators consider in order to improve their service to the L or the ML community?
Maybe we can all think together about this burning question that I have been thinking about. What could the landscape of language education look like when Gen AI becomes a norm, an integral part of our lives, right? Like right now, it's easy. Don't use ChatGPT for your writing. But ChatGPT kind of tools are becoming part of the programs that we are already using.
Mm-hmm.
When that day comes, how would it impact the language education? Imagine a future where we all have our personal Jarvis from the Marvel universe in our phones, watches, or glasses, capable of translating language in real time. What does this mean for language education? I'm not talking about the job security. Rather, my question revolves around the shift of roles and directions in language education. For example, in years, would the native level fluency from Gen AI become a norm, at least for written form? What implications might this have on years of dedicated work by language educators who really try to value and recognize linguistic diversity and identities of non-native speakers of English, right? What about students who do not have access to such technology and who will inevitably be at a huge disadvantage, right? I really have no idea at this point because things are evolving so quickly. How should we prepare our students with what kind of skills and mindsets? This is what I have been really thinking about, and I invite everyone for this question.
You, Jung Han, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you on our burning questions today. And we definitely look forward to all of the resources that you will provide in terms of educating ourselves further on generative AI. Thank you for tuning in to Our Burning Questions, produced by Midstate Auburn at OCM BOCES. If you would like to learn more about today's guest or any of the resources we discussed, please visit Midstate Auburn's webpage at ocmboces.org. That's ocmboces.org. Join us next time where we hope to answer more of your burning questions.